Hey everyone, today I'm back in Chaos Zero Nightmare to talk about our newest game mode, Sortie. Now, up to this point, we've only really had one game mode that really went into the roguelike nature of the game, and that was Chaos. However, Chaos is also the place where you're going to go to grind out the decks for new characters that you might have. So every time a new character comes out, or whenever a new season begins, you try and do a couple of Chaos runs to fish for a good deck for your characters that you can then use in other content in the game, be that seasonal content, Basin of Hyperspace, or just to farm for whatever you want to farm for when you're interacting with the gacha side of the game. However, it's meant that whenever you go into Chaos, you're very often going in there to try and farm for a deck, or try to focus on a very specific character because you want to try and get something going for them. Like you get a new character, so you want to get a good deck for said new character. And where do you do that? You do that in Chaos. So most of the time, whenever going into Chaos, you were just doing it to try and get a deck for a specific character, and you didn't really care too much about trying to get a good build for your whole team to try and clear the Chaos run. So, because of that, CZN's developers have decided to add a new game type called Sortie, where it's all about having a very difficult roguelike experience to try and get as far as you can, and then also just not caring about anything but that. So you can't get save data when you do this. How you progress through the Chaos is quite different as well compared to your normal Chaos runs, and you will also get some items at the end of this that you're able to use to alter the save data that you already have acquired while doing a Chaos run. So they kind of want you to shift your focus from, instead of spamming Chaos quite a bit to just try and farm for decks constantly, to running Sortie a little bit more to alter whatever mediocre save data that you might have gotten through Chaos, and then make that into like a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10. So nowadays, you go into Chaos, you do a couple of runs until you get a deck that is a pretty solid, like 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10. Then you go into Sortie, you play there for as long as you want, you get your currency at the end of your run, you spend that currency in the Sortie shop, you buy the specific items that you need to alter the save files that you got from your Chaos run, and then you turn that 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 into a much better 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 save data. And the items that we get are honestly really cool. Like we've got things that allow us to remove cards, duplicate cards, apply divine epiphanies, like even add cards to the deck that we just didn't find during the Chaos run. So there's a lot of customization that we get with the items that we can get from Sortie. So that's the reason why you want to play Sortie. It's to get these items, or of course to just interact with the roguelike gameplay. That is probably one of the reasons why a lot of people started playing CZN in the first place. It's a pretty unique gacha in the sense that it's like a roguelike deck building game, and so that's probably why a lot of people started playing CZN, and Sortie is kind of going more into that side of the game. So how does it work then? Now, if I were to compare it to any other games that are out there, Slay the Spire is a really good comparison, but this time around, Slay the Spire is a much better comparison compared to when I compared it to a Chaos run. That's a lot of comparing there. But basically, Slay the Spire is a comparison I made in the past because it is pretty similar to how CZN works. However, with Sortie, it is even more so the case because of how you obtain cards and permanent upgrades throughout a run. So whenever you start a Sortie run, you only get to pick one character, and this is a character that you get to choose for yourself, like out of all of the roster of characters that you have. However, there's going to be 3 more characters that join you throughout the run, and those are going to be on a draft system. So the first character that joins you at the start of a run, and you get to pick 1 out of 3 characters. This character will also have their full deck available for them, so that means basic cards, that means unique cards, and then all of the epiphanies that come with that. After you then beat the first boss, a second character will join you. However, this character, again, it is going to be a choice, 1 out of 3 characters, and they will also have all their basic cards removed. So you're just playing with the unique cards, and again, they will have their own epiphanies as well. And then the last character that joins you comes after you beat the second boss, because yes, there are 3 bosses in total with Sortie, and they will only have 2 cards, and these will be very build defining cards for those characters. So let's say, for example, it's a Veronica, she will have her ballista and then a card that draws like for the other combatants, for example, because that is kind of what Veronica does. She's there to have her ballista, a little bit of supportive DPS, and then she provides a lot of card draw. That's like her main theme. So that is what you're going to get if you choose Veronica as your fourth and last unit. So because of this, you don't really have to be too worried about needing to remove a lot of cards from the deck when the characters join you late. Like for example, the third character joins you very late, so you don't have to be too worried about that. And it also means that your deck won't be too bloated because you're playing with 4 characters instead of with the usual 3. So it just kind of spices up the gameplay a little bit. Now, in terms of acquiring your cards, that's also going to be very different, because instead of getting them through epiphanies like we have in a Chaos run, there's no RNG this time with if you're going to get a card, yes or no, or if you're going to get an epiphany for a card, yes or no. Instead, at the end of each combat, you're going to get a selection of 1 out of 3 cards, and then you can of course also choose to not take a card at all. These cards that you get can be normal cards, they can be cards with an epiphany on top of it already, or they can be neutral cards as well. So you just kind of pick and choose whatever makes the most sense for the deck that you're going for or for the build that you've already got going. We of course still have the Delane shop as well, where we can pick up cards, where we can pick up equipment. We can even pick up character cards in the Delane shop now, which is different as well. And if you have an epiphany on a card that you're not too fond of, there's also upgrades that we can get in the upgrade system for Sortie that will allow us to re-epiphany those cards in rest spots as well. So there's definitely still a lot of customization that you can do for like whatever cards you've already gotten. And of course, if you got a card and you're not too sure if you want to keep it, you can just remove it as well. That feature is still there. It is of course a very different approach to building your deck, because you now just get a card after each combat. Which also means that you can just kind of go crazy because there's no limits on your deck. You can make your deck as big or as small as you want. You can add as many copies of the same card in there as well as you want. It just depends on what you get given at the end of each combat, and also which combatants that you end up coming across when you're drafting a new team member for your team after you beat each of the bosses. Now, because there are 3 bosses, you might also think, well, isn't this going to make the run that much longer? Not really. Because it is now 3 bosses instead of the usual 2, they have made the routes to the bosses a little bit shorter. So the first and the second area are going to be a tiny bit shorter, and then the third area leading up to the final boss, that one is very short. So the runtime of an actual playthrough is about the same as what you would do in a normal Chaos run, so you don't really have to worry about it being too long. Now, overall, I feel like Sortie is pretty fun. It's a pretty different take on the roguelike gameplay that we have in CZN. Of course, if you've played Slay the Spire, it's going to feel very familiar to that. But if all you've played is Chaos so far and you haven't really played other roguelike deck builders, this is going to feel very different. It's very fun to just create those ridiculously strong decks, but you kind of need to do that as well, because you can ramp up the difficulty of a Sortie run quite a bit. Not only is Sortie itself just kind of challenging, but you also have a lot of difficulty levels, and starting from difficulty 5, you can also add a bunch of negative modifiers. You can add as many or as little as you want. That will make it more difficult for you, but will also give you a bigger payout when you do manage to clear a run. And then of course that just gives you more resources to go buy those items to change your save data, so it's just kind of more time efficient, I guess. Or if you just want to do it for the challenge, of course, because that can be a lot of fun as well. Because sometimes it felt like Chaos could maybe be a little bit too easy. Sortie can definitely get really freaking hard, especially if you add a bunch of negative modifiers on there. So if you just want some challenging gameplay, then Sortie is maybe what you are looking for. And well, that's pretty much everything I have to say about Sortie. It's pretty fun, it's pretty different compared to your normal Chaos runs. The rewards that we can get from it are really cool as well, allowing us to change our save files quite substantially. And I think it's a really good addition to the game. So let me know down below what you think about Sortie, what are your thoughts on it. And with that, I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.